The Sydney Morning Herald is a daily compact newspaper published by Fairfax Media in Sydney and is also an Australian national online news brand. Founded in 1831 as the Sydney Herald, the SMH is the oldest continuously published newspaper in Australia. The newspaper is published 6 days a week. It is available at outlets in Sydney, regional New South Wales, Canberra, and South East Queensland. Overview: The Sydney Morning Herald includes a variety of supplements, including the magazine's Good Weekend and the Sydney magazine. There are a variety of lift-outs, some of them co-branded with Fairfax Media's online classified advertising sites, The Guide on Monday, Good Living and Domain on Tuesday, Money on Wednesday, Drive, Metro on Friday, News Review, Spectrum, Domain, Drive and My Career on Saturday. According to Roy Morgan Research Readership Surveys, in the 12 months to March 2011, the paper was read 766,000 times on Monday to Friday, and read 1,014,000 times on Saturdays. The Audit Bureau of Circulation's audit on newspaper circulation states that in December 2013 an average of 132,000 copies were sold, Monday to Friday, and 228,000 copies on Saturday, both having declined 16% in 12 months. Concerning the newspaper's website smh.com or third-party web analytics providers Alexa and SimilarWeb rate the site as the 17th and 32nd most visited website in Australia respectively, as of July 2015. SimilarWeb rates the site as the 5th most visited news website in Australia and as the 42nd newspaper's website globally, attracting more than 15 million visitors per month. The editor is Darren Goodser. Former editors include William Curnow, Andrew Garron, Sean Aylmer, Frederick William Ward, Charles Brunsdon Fletcher, Colin Bingham, Max Prisk, John Alexander, Paul McGough, Alan Revel, Alan Oakley and Peter Frey. History. 3 employees of the now-defunct Sydney Gazette, Ward Stevens, Frederick Stokes and William McGarvey, founded the Sydney Herald in 1831. The 4-page weekly had a print run of 750. In 1840, the newspaper began to publish daily. In 1841, an Englishman named John Fairfax purchased the operation, renaming it the Sydney Morning Herald the following year. Fairfax, whose family were to control the newspaper for almost 150 years, based his editorial policies upon principles of candour, honesty and honour. We have no wish to mislead. No interest to gratify by unsparing abuse or indiscriminate approbation. During the decade 1890, Donald Murray worked there. The SMH was late to the trend of printing news rather than just advertising on the front page, doing so from April 15, 1944. Of the country's metropolitan dailies, only the West Australian was later in making the switch. In 1949, the newspaper launched a Sunday edition, the Sunday Herald. 4 years later, this was merged with a newly acquired Sun newspaper to create the Sun Herald, which continues to this day. In 1995, the company launched smh.com or, the newspaper's web edition. The site has since grown to include interactive and multimedia features beyond the content in the print edition. Around the same time, the organisation moved from Jones Street to new offices at Darling Park and built a new printing press at Chullera, in the city's west. The SMH has since moved with other Sydney Fairfax divisions to a building at Darling Island. In May 2007, Fairfax Media announced it would be moving from a broadsheet format to the smaller compact or tabloid size, in the footsteps of the Times, for both the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Fairfax Media dumped these plans later in the year. However, in June 2012, Fairfax Media again announced it planned to shift both broadsheet newspapers to tabloid size, in March 2013. Fairfax also announced it would cut staff across the entire group by 1,900 over 3 years and erect paywalls around the paper's websites. The subscription type is to be a freemium model, limiting readers to a number of free stories per month, with a payment required for further access. The announcement was part of an overall digital-first strategy of increasingly digital or online content over printed delivery, to increase sharing of editorial content, and to assist the management's wish for full integration of its online, print and mobile platforms. In July 2013 it was announced that the SMH's news director, Jack Brennan, will become editor-in-chief, replacing Sean Aylmer. On February 22, 2014, the final Saturday edition was produced in broadsheet format, with this too converted to compact format on March 1, 2014. Ahead of the decommissioning of the printing plant at Chullera in June 2014. Political viewpoint: historically, the SMH had been a conservative newspaper. It did not endorse the Australian Labor Party at any election until 1984 or at a state election until 2003. During the 2004 Australian federal election, the Herald announced it would no longer endorse one party or another at election time. The newspaper said the policy might yet be revised. A truly awful government of any colour, for example, would bring reappraisal. The Herald subsequently endorsed the Conservative coalition at the 2007 NSW state election, but endorsed Labour at the 2007 and 2010 federal elections, before endorsing the coalition again at the 2013 federal elections. The Herald believes only the coalition can achieve a stable government that can be trusted to deliver what it promises. The newspaper has in recent years attempted to spearhead political campaigns, including the campaign for Sydney and Earth Hour. Notable contributors: Lucian Boz, Mike Carlton, Ann Davis, Peter Fitzsimons, Ross Gittins, Peter Harcher, Adele Horan, H. G. Kippax, Roy Masters, Paul Sheehan. Ownership: Fairfax went public in 1957 and grew to acquire interests in magazines, radio and television. The group collapsed spectacularly on December 11, 1990, when Warwick Fairfax, great-great-grandson of John Fairfax, attempted to privatize the group by borrowing $1.8 billion. The group was bought by Conrad Black before being relisted in 1992. In 2006, Fairfax announced a merger with Rural Press, which brought a Fairfax family member, John B. Fairfax, in as a significant player in the company. Content Column 8 Column 8 is a short column to which Herald readers send their observations of interesting happenings. It was first published on January 11, 1947. The name comes from the fact that it originally occupied the final column of the broadsheet newspaper's front page. In a front-page redesign in the lead-up to the Sydney Olympic Games in 2000, Column 8 moved to the back page of the first section from July 31, 2000. The content tends to the quirky, typically involving strange urban occurrences, instances of confusing signs, wordplay, and discussion of more or less esoteric topics. The column is also sometimes affectionately known as Granny, after a fictional grandmother who supposedly edited it. The old Granny logo was used for the first 20 years of the column and is occasionally resurrected for a special retrospective. The logo was a caricature of Sidney Deemer, originator of the column and its author for 14 years. It was edited for 15 years by George Richards, who retired on January 31, 2004. Other editors besides Deemer and Richards have been Duncan Thompson, Bill Fitter, Colonel Allison, Jim Cunningham, and briefly, Peter Bowes and Lenore Nicklin. The column is currently edited by Pat Shale. Opinion The opinion section is a regular of the daily newspaper, containing opinion on a wide range of issues. Mostly concerned with relevant political, legal and cultural issues, the section presents work by regular columnists, including Herald political columnist Philip Correa, Paul Sheehan and Richard Ackland, as well occasional reader-submitted content. Iconoclastic Sydney barrister Charles C. Waterstreet, upon whose life-workplace comedy Rake is loosely based, also has a regular humour column in this section. Good Weekend Good Weekend is a lift-up magazine that is distributed with both the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age on Saturdays. It contains, on average, 4 feature articles written by its stable of writers and syndicated from overseas, as well as sections on food, wine and fashion. Writers include Janet Holley, Amanda Houghton and Greg Bierup. Other sections include Modern Guru, which features humorous columnists including Danny Katz responding to the everyday dilemmas of readers. A Samurai Sudoku. And The Two of Us, containing interviews with a pair of close friends, relatives or colleagues. Good Weekend is edited by Ben Napastk. Previous editors include Judith Whelan and Fenella Suter. Digitisation. The paper has been partially digitised as part of the Australian Newspapers Digitisation Programme project of the National Library of Australia. See also, Earth Hour, Journalism in Australia, List of newspapers in Australia, The Sydney Mail, weekly magazine of the Sydney Morning Herald, published from 1860 to 1938. References. Further reading, Merrill, John C. and Harold A. Fisher. The World's Great Dailies, Profiles of 50 Newspapers, pages 314-19, Gavin Suter Company of Heralds, A Century and a Half of Australian Publishing by John Fairfax Limited and its predecessors, 1831 to 1981. Carlton, Victoria, Melbourne University Press, ISBN 0522842186, Gavin Suter Heralds and Angels, The House of Fairfax 1841 to 1992. Ringwood, Victoria, Penguin Books, ISBN 0140173307. External links, official website, Earth Hour Archive, The Sydney Morning Herald at Trove Digitised Newspapers and more, The Sydney Herald at Trove Digitised Newspapers and more, The Sun Herald at Trove Digitised Newspapers and more.